Welcome to the Suncoast In Depth podcast. My name is Brett Watson, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Sammi Ferguson. I should call you Saint Sammi.
Why is that?
Because you're married to Bryce Ferguson.
Well, you know, we all have our flaws.
So you are supermom, business partner, and the first woman on the Reconstruction Junction podcast series.
That's true. I was thinking about it and I was like, didn't Paul write something that women are supposed to be like seen and not heard in the church? So I was like, you know, let's push past that.
I can comment on that. Actually, he did say things like that. Well, they're attributed to him. But I think that particular verse is in question as to whether he wrote it or not. It seems to be added later. If I'm thinking of the right passage, don't quote me. Nevertheless, he was dealing with a very patriarchal system, and he's also the same guy that said, in Christ there is no such thing as male or female.
Well, then there's all the answers we need. We need nothing else.
Yeah.
That's it. Done.
That's it.
Perfect. Fixed.
Okay.
Everything's great.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. So, as you know, we've been doing this series on Reconstruction, and by that we mean that there are a lot of people who would have called themselves Christians in this country, and they are deconstructing a lot of those beliefs. And I chose to call this Reconstruction because it's positive, but also because I see it as problematic that people tend to throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater. And I just think it's unnecessary, and it causes a lot of unnecessary pain, loss, grief. So you have a story. So I'm going to ask you to just give us your religious background and your story, kind of like as you sent to me. So that was good.
Broke it down in a timeline. So I was born and raised in New York, so Long Island for the first 9 years of life. And I grew up Lutheran. So we go to church Sundays and Wednesdays. My parents were the worship team people. Yeah. They also were the youth pastors. So my mom and dad, when they met, my mom was in high school, my dad was just out of high school, got married young. So they were 19 and 21 when they got married, had my sister 11 months later, and then they had me 22 months after my sister. So we were like young, cool parents, cool kids. We were like always at the church. When they would do youth group stuff, we were like those really obnoxious little kids that were like hanging out, wanting to hang out with the teenagers.
Okay, pause for a second.
Yes.
There are so many similarities. Like reading your story the other day, I had so much nostalgia because I started as a youth director at a ELCA Lutheran church. My daughter, Arlene's son, were the irritating little kids that hung around with the youth group, and they always had kids at our house, that kind of thing. Yeah. So many similarities. And I was a worship leader.
It was such a great time growing up. We were very involved we had like Vacation Bible School, but like we would go out in the woods for Vacation Bible School, and they would always I remember it was Sean Smith was the musical guy who would come out, and he was a guitar player, and he would come, but he would stay at our house during the week. Same thing, they would bring bands in, and the bands would all stay at our house because my parents were the young, cool people. Yeah. So we would just hang out with like Captive Free just on like the weekends, and like it was no big deal. Wow. It was a lot of fun. They would do weird science experiments in our house too that when you're 4 or 5 years old, you're like, can I do it? And my mom's like, absolutely not. Like go upstairs and go do something else. So, but my parents, something with the Lutheran church is they have this annual, I think it was 3 years, this big, the youth gathering. And it was this like highly sought after thing that you could only go when you were, I think it was like 16. You had to be a certain age to be able to go. And my parents brought a group. It was in New Orleans that year. And they brought a group. And my sister and I, of course, couldn't go. But they came home and we saw all the video. We saw the stories. I still have the Bible that they were given on my bookshelf. Like, it was just such a cool thing. And I was like, let me guess.
the Bible was a good news Bible.
Yes. Yes, it was.
And I just want to say that I protested that ELCA youth event because of all the conditions they put on it.
Yes. So, but when you're a kid and you're seeing the experience that all these people are having, and then you're watching it on like VHS tape sitting in the living room, it was just the goal was to go.
Yeah.
And that year the theme was River of Hope. It's just something I will always remember. So when we moved, so in 99, my mom got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So she's in remission now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But the cold weather, the stairs, the environment in New York just wasn't suitable. So we moved to Florida. We also have a lot of grandparents down here. My mom's parents and my dad's parents all live down here. So we moved down to Florida and we were trying to find another home church. So, which is very different than a New York home church because like old is the demographic of Englewood.
Yes.
So we ended up finding another Lutheran church down in Englewood. And my parents tried so hard to like turn it into what we had. So they started contemporary worship, which was
How'd that go over?
Well, it was the fifth Sunday of the month. So, you know, there's only a handful of those throughout the year.
Oh, so they only did it every fifth
the
Sunday.
fifth Sundays they did contemporary.
Yeah.
Or if the organist couldn't be there, then they would get to do a contemporary service.
Very
Contemporary meaning dad on guitar, mom on keyboard. So like when I was a kid, I wanted to be in the like part of the worship team so bad. Like my goal, I was like, I'm going to do it.
You have a good voice.
Thank you. So I learned how to play bass guitar so that, because my theory was everyone learns how to play electric guitar because everyone wants to be the cool guy playing the guitar. I was like,
True.
They're going to need a bassist. I'm going to be that girl. They're going to ask me to help. So still know how to play bass. So if there's ever a need, I got you. I can.
Do you really?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Didn't know this.
I have a purple bass guitar that lives at my parents' house. Yeah. So I was like, okay, mom and dad are going to
Make a
need
note,
me.
Stephen. Okay.
Mom and dad are going to need me to step in one week and I'm going to be ready. That or the tambourine. I can kill it on a tambourine. So they tried really hard. And there was like 5 other kids in the entire church. And so my parents fought for a youth group to be started. Mm-hmm. So the 5 of us banded together and we started a youth group. And there was, her name was Barbara and she was amazing. She was like all of our grandmother basically. And she would take us on trips and we would go kayaking and we would spend time as like a youth group. We did a lock-in one night, which was terrifying and amazing all at the same time for, 5 girls running around a church.
Yes.
But something was always missing because it wasn't the same. So
up in New York, how many kids?
Oh, there probably was like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a big group. And it was so funny because they did a Star Wars night. I remember this vividly, where they watched 4, 5, and 6. And there was a lot of pushback from the church about watching Star Wars in the church. Yeah. And I was like,
Come on.
It's outer space. Like, we all know outer space is real. Like, it's not this... That's science we can all believe in, that outer space is real. So... But it was just always so fun. So when we got down here and it was not the same. But I remembered, I was like, let me just make it to 16 because we're going. My sister and I went to youth gathering and it was in San Antonio, Texas. And our pastor took us. And there had been a pastoral change. And we actually had a female pastor, which that was a big deal. But she took my sister and I to youth group. And I remember to youth gathering. And I remember going and feeling absolutely nothing. I felt nothing. And I was like, I was supposed to have this like religious experience and Newsboys was there and they were going to like light up my like passion for Jesus and all these things. And I felt nothing. And I remember coming home and being like, well, that was a dud. That was a waste of time. What do I do with this information? I'm 16. So I had a conversation with my parents who were very understanding. My dad at that point was on church council, which was an interesting time. My mom was part, and my sister, they actually asked my sister to be part of when the pastoral change happened, the search committee to find a new pastor. So they let my 17-year-old sister sit on the committee. That was...
To represent youth?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
It was interesting because I love her, but at that time she was very rebellious, very anti a lot of things. So it was very interesting, take of things, which is how I think part of the reason we had a female pastor was because we were like, fight the patriarchy. Let's do this. Yeah. There was a little undertone of that. So I talked to my parents and I was like, I don't know if I want to go to church anymore. And they looked at me, and we had grown up in church. My grandparents on my father's side are Catholic. My dad grew up Catholic. And I was like, I'm not going to church anymore. And my mom said, okay, take some time, think about it. Let us know when you want to come back.
Good for her.
Yeah. And I remember, like, even at 16 being like, okay, well, that was not, I was expecting to get in like World War III with my parents about it. And they were just like, tell us when you want to come back. I talked to one of my best friends. We were in theater together, and she was going to a non-denominational church, but her parents no longer wanted to go. She couldn't drive. I had a car, and she was like, let's go. Cool. So we went to this little non-denominational church in Inglewood, and I just remember going and feeling something again. And I don't know if it was like the music, the band, the message. I don't remember from back then, but I felt something. So I was like, okay, maybe this is more the path I need to take. Maybe it's just a Lutheran thing, not a God thing. But then I go to college, and I was like, well, no one has time for that in college. I had a full-time job. I was going to school full-time. And then I met a boy, and I fell in love and thought, this is the answer for everything. He was Catholic, grew up Catholic school his whole life. And we were together. I was 19 when we started dating. When I was 21, we got engaged. He put conditions on our engagement and said, the only way we can get married is if we get married in the Catholic Church. You are not allowed to go through the full Catholicness, I guess is the best way to put it, unless you become a Catholic. So for this relationship to continue, you need to become a Catholic. Being 21, being in love, I was like, okay, fine. Going through Catholic classes on Saturday nights was the most insane thing I have ever done. The dogma that they teach you. Mm-hmm. And being a almost fully formed adult, because I mean at 21 you're not, frontal lobe's still not completely
quite there, yeah.
But you're like close enough that you can feel it. And I remember sitting on this weird sofa with these other adults, and I'm looking around and I'm like, y'all believe this malarkey? Like I couldn't get it. I was like, all right, I guess this is, okay. So I kind of, something I learned in therapy, if you put things in boxes in your head, you can put them away. And then when you need them, you take them back out and you can like revisit them. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm just going to put this in a box and put it away. This is not something I need to really worry about, but it makes him happy, which will make our lives better. His big thing was, I would hate for us to go to church when we have children and you not to be able to completely participate in the sacraments.
Right.
What would our children think of their mother? Don't pull that card with me. I was like, okay, great. So he put conditions on our relationship through religion, and Catholicism puts conditions on your religion. Mm-hmm. So I just started to think that there were always conditions. There's always going to be conditions when it comes to religion, which was another huge breakdown, I think, in my deconstruction part. Yeah. And then I went through the whole thing, got welcomed into the church, I guess, on Easter Sunday, which was a huge deal. My grandparents drove up from...
But they didn't want to rebaptize you.
No, which I was baptized Catholic, by the way.
Oh, you were?
I was baptized Catholic, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which was so strange. I was like, Mom, why did you do that? She's like, because Grandma wanted to. Like, that was the reason, because Grandma expected it.
Typically the reason.
Right.
Some family member is staunch,
yes.
And they said... And so you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And my mom was like, we didn't, like, it was just some water. Like, that was my mother's theory, was like, it doesn't matter where the water comes from. The point of it is having something to believe in. That was always what my parents wanted us, was something to believe in. So it's Easter. My grandparents drove up. My grandmother was my sponsor. Like, it was a whole big thing. That was in April of 2012. In July of 2012, he calls off the wedding. He had a whole other life happening with another human.
Wow.
So I was like, all of what I was just taught to believe in was to make this other human happy, who was not following. I took the classes. He was not following the ways that the Catholic religion.
Probably could have guessed that without the classes, right?
But I'm like, isn't there something about not cheating on people? Like, I would think. So completely broke me. It shattered everything.
Yeah.
And I went on this journey. I I didn't know what I actually believed in anymore, because it's like, why believe in anything at this point? And I moved back home. So I was living in Orlando at the time, and I moved back home, and because I got a job, really great job, living with my parents again. And my mom's like, why don't you come to church with us again? They're still going to the exact same church we've always gone to. I was like, fine. New pastor again. And I go and I talk to Pastor Brian, and I go, if I don't want to be Catholic anymore, what do I have to do? And he goes, you're not Catholic. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, I mean, there's no real process. He's like, you believe.
We give you a shot.
Right. I was like, is it the red pill or the blue pill? Like, what are we doing here? So I was like, okay, so now what am I? I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't go to church with my parents. I went a couple times here and there just to make mom happy, because that's what you do as a good kid. You make your parents happy. And I just kind of floundered. And my life was a mess. My personal life was a mess. I just was existing to exist, didn't really have a direction. And it wasn't until, so I met Bryce at a liquor store. It was a networking event, but it was at a liquor store. That's what we always tell people our origin story is. And I started hanging out with him.
It's cleaner than mine.
And we were just really good friends. And I started hanging out with the kids, and he invited me to church with him. And he was going to Suncoast. And this was 2016. So I very distinctly remember my first service. We dropped the kids off in the kids area, and we walk in, and I'm like, this is not okay. This is not normal, but okay, I'm going along with it. And he sits in the second row. So first of all, as a Lutheran, we sit in the back. We don't sit in the front, we sit in the back. So I'm like, all right. So I'm sitting awkwardly in the second row, and everyone stands up to sing, and it is a rock concert. And I'm like, this is not normal. And the sermon series was the lifeguard sermon series. So there was
I remember that.
There was a normal song at the end, right? It was something contemporary, something. And then the video clips start playing of the creative team out on Siesta Beach acting like buffoons. And I am sitting here like, what is this sorcery that I am sitting in? But I love it. Like, I'm loving every second of it. And then Pastor Larry got up and started preaching. And I was like, well, he seems like a good dude. Like, this is where my brain is. Did I necessarily listen to the message? Probably not as much as I should have, because I was like, there's sensory overload happening. I'm like, what is this? Yeah. But I came back the next week, and I came back the next week. And then somehow I got suckered into volunteering. And that's when I met Arlene, because I started volunteering in the youth area.
Way back then?
Mm-hmm. 2016.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that's when we officially came here. I mean, we had connections here for sure.
Yeah.
I think, didn't Ryan star in those beach videos, the lifeguard series?
Oh yeah, it was so funny, and I'm like, what? And then you start listening to the message part of it, and you're listening to, and I remember, because this is right after the document gate of 2016.
Docugate.
So Bryce was there for the whole before and after. And I was it was right after when I started, and he filled me in, and he started going because our friend Christine invited him. He went to a funeral here for Christine's late husband, and that's how he got hooked onto Suncoast. I loved it because I saw the youth area really spoke to me, because I saw now our children, but his children at the time, and how they would get their cup filled. Even they were in the preschool room with Bob and Leslie, and Bob would sit with William, and my son is on the autism spectrum, and he is an incredible young man. And Bob would sit with him and read animal books to him. And they would sit quietly in a corner, and he would read him an animal book and then give him some goldfish, because that's the currency back in the youth area is goldfish.
Yeah. And in many other places.
Yes.
That is the currency.
Goldfish and coffee creamer, weirdly. It's a thing.
Didn't see that coming.
It's a thing. And Elena and that was their first experience being around other kids. So I felt something. And so as we have grown being here in the church, and there was a point where, I was working on the youth staff. I was part of, I was teaching in the second and third grade room, and I was in the nursery and all these things. And I just... The clear message of love is the answer.
Yep.
for all things resonated. Now, I have emailed you about my theories on, is love actually something that any human is capable of in that spectrum? I don't think so. But it's helped in the Reconstruction. I am now, weirdly, in a bit of a deconstruction again because I'm raising...
You can't love anything?
Well, that, and I only have so much love to give. But I'm raising a daughter. I have an 11-year-old daughter, Elena, who I love with all of my heart. What kind of environment am I teaching her when the Bible is used to weaponize, is used as a weapon against women, specifically? I was joking early, and I said, women are to be seen and not heard. Women are supposed to be subservient to their husbands. Mm-hmm. We have very little autonomy choice of what happens to our humans. And the Bible is used against that. So how am I supposed to teach her when I'm not sure what I believe when it comes to the patriarchal structure that is religion? Mm-hmm. So I'm stuck. I'm still stuck because it's like, how do I look past that? And how do we look past the fact that other people, that's what they're bringing up? You know what I mean?
Yes. So can I,
yes.
Can I comment on that?
Please do. Help me.
So the Bible... It really starts with, what do I think the Bible is? Okay.
To me, it's a storybook.
It is.
It's a book of stories.
Mm-hmm. It's a collection of stories, letters, some historical narratives, not many, sacred myth, so origin stories, that kind of thing, right? So it's this mix of literary genre written by people, sharing their experiences with God, the world, each other, and sharing in some ways their beliefs about God, reality, the world. That's what the Bible is. That's what it is. So I understand that there are a great many in the Christian world that say that it's more than that. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I sympathize with them because when you read some of the Bible, it's like, wow. Mm-hmm. But then you read things like women should be submissive to their husbands.
It's just gross.
This is befitting in the Lord. And so what do you do with that? Was your question, right? What do you do with that?
What do you do with that?
How do you look past it? That's what it was.
Well, that, and how do you teach?
You look past it because you can. Okay? Paul is another human being, right?
Right.
He's writing to other human beings within a certain historical, cultural context. Every word that he said there is not divinely inspired. Sorry. It just isn't. Okay? You can't say that the world is 6,000 years old. We know that it's not 6,000 years old, even though the Bible, when you put it together, it should only be about 6,000 years old. Mm-hmm. So the Bible is not this perfect, the way we think of as perfect. I like to say it's perfectly imperfect. Mm-hmm. And that's another discussion for another time, very involved. But it is not historically accurate. Mm-hmm. We know this. When I say I know something, it's a very tight definition of knowing, okay? We have scientific evidence that is mountainous for the age of the earth, as an example, being 4.3 billion years old, okay? Mm-hmm. We know the earth is at least that old, okay? Right. So we don't have to look at the Bible and say, either, well, the scientists are all wrong. No, that's dumb. Okay? And we don't need to look at it as, the Bible's all dumb. No, that's wrong.
Well, can I just say the Old Testament's kind of dumb?
You can say it, but you're wrong.
Well, so even things that have been discussed, we've been learning about Moses a little bit, the story of Moses and
yes.
And I struggle with the story of Moses because why did he kill the Egyptian? Because he wasn't doing something that he liked the Egyptian was doing to another human?
Don't know. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. But then he's the guy who came down with the tablet that says, "Thou shalt not murder." So it's like, dude, really? Yeah. Like, what is the difference?
Perfectly imperfect.
Right.
Here's why. What? Were you done?
Well, and then just the whole theory of like he helped feed like water some sheep and then he gets a wife. Like women are to be like bartered with. And it's like, okay, well, what's the worth then of a woman if we're so easily bartered with?
Not much back then.
Exactly. What am I teaching my kids?
That's not God.
But it's in the book that other people believe is the word of God.
That's their problem.
Well, I know that, but it's the society problem. So how do we fix it?
Very slowly. It's.
I don't have that kind of time.
It's an up. You don't have to fix it. Yeah, you don't have to. But that, I guess, what I'm getting at is because that now, given current day context, that is a ridiculous notion that women are property and they can be bartered. It can be used as barter material. Of course, that's ridiculous. Okay, it's also ridiculous in our modern context to think that it's okay to tell slaves that they should return to their masters and be subservient. Ridiculous in modern day. The book wasn't written in modern day. The book was written in a world where all that was perfectly normal, as sad as that is. Okay, we don't need, and we can teach our children this, we don't need to look at those things as if that's God's attitude towards women in this example. Of course it isn't. What's fascinating is that given that world, given that context, Jesus had women all around him. That was such a no-no. Okay.
Well, the other Mary.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're going to go there.
She doesn't even get like a full name. She's just the other Mary.
That's the world they lived in.
Come on, that's just insane.
I know. It is, and it's gross. You said it right. I agree. But they were working with what they had at the time. So when these texts were written, it's really remarkable. I can stare at the grossness, right? Which is all normal for them, totally normal. And I can fixate on the grossness and throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater in the process. Or I can look at more than the grossness and see the remarkable fact that the people that were at the head of the movement were wildly liberal, wildly inclusive, especially, they even are for today. The fact that Paul, the Apostle Paul, would say, look, guys, in Christ, drop this whole gender thing. There is no male or female. What?
But then you have other religious organizations that then turn into how politics are.
Yes.
That are using they're picking key phrases, and we know that they do, to make sure that people feel marginalized, smaller, less than. Women, persons of color,
for sure,
and the LGBTQIA plus community.
For sure.
Are all lumped in these we're not whole humans. And they're using the Bible as a tool to do that. Now,
they do.
I just watching The West Wing, and if anyone's ever seen the clip of President Bartlett in The West Wing, who quotes the Bible back to one of the Bible thumpers, and he's like, well, then you can't touch the skin of a pig, so there goes football, and he goes through the list. And I'm like, okay, so, but you don't hear
enough of that.
Right. That's not what gets told. What gets told is women are subservient to their husbands, shall not lay with another man. That's what we hear. So as a society, that's where I struggle, because it's used as a weapon.
Right.
And why do we put so much weight on a book when we're banning books every day, but we don't ban that book?
Because the obvious answer to this is because, the people that use it that way are, and well, they're using it to uphold what they are comfortable with. White patriarchy. Right. So it is, I think, our responsibility, especially leadership in the Christian world, to combat that. It needs to be combated. Not in a combative way, necessarily.
Oh, where's the fun in that?
Not as fun. But I do see value in not devaluing the people that devalue people. And does that make sense? I mean,
yes, but so this is part of my deconstruction, trying to put bricks back in, because how do I look past that, the fundamentalists, but also the fundamental like problems that people are using the Bible for, when yes, it's supposed to, like, we like to see it as love. How do I get past it? How do I get past the fact that it was not that, as a woman who feels like slightly feminist adjacent,
depending on who you ask.
who you ask,
Yeah, right.
like I could be, whatever. But how do we get past it? How do we see that it's not all a bunch of malarkey, the Bible, and we focus on the things that are about the love part of it, and make sure that others don't like see the same way. It's so separate.
Yes, it is. And Suncoast is a unicorn. This is one place where that effort is being made, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But how do
Except for the fact that I've never had a woman on this podcast series.
Exactly. We're changing. We're making the mold changes right now.
Yes.
But I just and I feel like, the center point even of our country was supposed to be religious freedom, right? That was something that they wanted. But then they built the entire, the system is built with religion in the background.
Oh,
the entire system is.
And kind of had to be.
Right. So it's like, okay, so great idea, great theory, religious freedom, awesome. But we're not putting it into practice.
Yeah. Well, we are.
Ish.
Yes.
I'll throw an ish at the end of that.
We are. Obviously, there's a lot of ignoring that ideal. But when you compare,
the
United States to pretty much any other country other than, Western Europe.
Yes.
Even in Israel, the one democracy in the whole region, right? There's not religious freedom the way we have it here. So, yeah, are there problems? Oh, yes, many. You cited just a few, right?
Yes.
Centered around this whole Christian worldview, right? But what happens that really bothers me, and I don't know for sure if this is where you are. If it does, it bothers me. So how's that for an emotional setup? Because I've studied this stuff my entire adult life, right? I see so much good in it, despite all the grossness. And I get frustrated with the polar positions that I see emerging, not just in religion, but since that's what we're talking about, the polar positions that arise from this topic. Either I am, damn it, the Bible is everything and every word in it is perfect. I can quote to you doctrinal belief statements that literally say everything in the Bible is totally true. Never mind the facts, never mind that I can absolutely prove that that's not true. Yeah, that's the belief statement. And they rely largely on the fact that most Christians will never really read the Bible to know any different. Okay? But I have read the Bible. I have studied it my entire adult life. I continue to study it. Almost every day I read the Bible, right? I have studied the history around it. World history. I love that stuff. I'm nerdy, okay? And because I see so much good in it, and even the good that it's done in history, along with a lot of grossness, people have done in their interpretations of it. I hate to see people polarize and either make it a part of the Holy Quartet, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Bible, or on the other side of the spectrum, throw it all out like it's all just nonsense. Both positions are stupid. Sorry, I said a bad word. I said the S word. It's stupid. Okay? I am a heretic to these folks, and in some cases, a religious fanatic to these folks. And neither one of those things is true. I am a feminist. whatever that means. Okay. I definitely think that women are equal to men. Okay. There is no inferiority.
Perfect. That's all we need.
Okay. This is like a non-issue, right? I have a black son. I am not a racist. I guess you could have a black son and still be a racist.
I mean,
yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's less likely. Let's put it that way.
Hopefully less likely.
I have an Asian son too. Does that count?
I mean, you're just United Nations over
We
here.
thought we had a Mexican daughter. Turned out that she's mostly Scottish.
You are the UN. That's really what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not a racist. I'm not, but I get looked at as I'm not racist enough with these fools over here, right? And then I get looked at by these guys sometimes less so. Just to be fair, just to be honest, it's far less on this side of the spectrum. They don't tend to be as vehement or, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Radicalized but there are some way over here that are like, you are a racist because you won't admit that you are.
Doesn't make sense.
Come on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's ridiculousness on both sides, but it's what's so frustrating to me is so many people seem to polarize. Like, come on, guys. Let's just be realistic.
But what is realistic? Because realistic is different to everyone based off of their upbringing, their status, their monetary life, their home situation. So it's like, what if we were to make a flow chart? I love a good like organized chart. If I were to put everything in boxes, what would equate the middle?
Okay, that's all very fair. I get that. And I feel bested there, okay? Because you're right. Everybody's normal, everybody's middle is going to be different, right? But at the end of the day, we can all agree that love is best.
I only have so much love to give.
So what? It's still the best.
It is the best, but I can't do it all day. I cannot.
Okay.
I just can't. And that's been.
You gonna throw love out then?
Sometimes. So there are days.
Right.
There are days where I'm like, I can't. There are days I look at my husband and I love my husband, and I look at him and I'm like, I can't love you anymore today. I have nothing left. I am so spent. I have nothing left to give.
Yeah, we all go through that.
So the idea that I have to love everyone the way Jesus did, which is just unrealistic.
You don't have to do anything. Well, first of all.
Well, you know.
Well, words matter.
Well, it is highly encouraged that we.
Yeah. What's the consequence if you don't?
Eternal damnation?
Definitely not.
Okay, perfect. Then I guess I'm fine. Exactly right. There we go. Done. Fully reconstructed. We're good to go.
Yay! Victory! Yeah, so eternal damnation. God, this always comes up. Always. And I love it.
Remember, I did go through Catholic school where I learned all about that really weird purgatory area that they talk about, which I feel like is what we're living in now. Who's considered it, but what do I know?
Looking at the history, I have a theory about purgatory. Okay. So when you look back far enough, you have 5 ancient schools. I think 5. I always say that, and then I wonder if there's a 6th. Anyway, so you have these ancient schools of thought, right? One is Rome. You have Ephesus. You have Caesarea. You have Antioch. You have Alexandria. I think that's it. In those ancient schools, like literally they were schools, like they were schools of thought on Christianity, right? So we're talking about the first 3 centuries, right, that these developed. And when you look back at their material, you have Alexandria, Caesarea, Antioch, all they're universalist. People don't go to eternal damnation. So the majority of Christians in the early church then were likely universalist. Okay, and there's all kinds of artwork that back that up, and archaeologically and stuff. You have Rome, who said there's a possibility that eternal damnation awaits those who make the decision to do things like eternally deny God. But it was really rare. Okay. Then you have Ephesus that said, No, there's no eternal damnation, but there is annihilation of the soul. So you'll spend however much time you need to pay off your sin debt in a purgation, kind of purgatory, and then you'll be destroyed. Okay. So that's the schools of thought, right? The majority of them were all about, no, God's too loving to send people to eternal damnation. That was nowhere on the radar, to be perfectly frank. Even though in the English versions of the Bible, you'll read things that make you feel like, wait a minute, he sends the sheep on his right to eternal life and the goats on his left to eternal damnation. Mm-hmm. Eternal punishment is what it says.
Yeah.
But language is a thing.
Right.
For example, in that passage, the word that is translated for punishment is the Greek word kolossus. Kolossus actually has agricultural roots. It along the lines of like pruning, okay? Corrective punishment. So the Greeks use the word kolossus for a restorative kind of justice.
Okay.
You're restoring someone, okay? You're bringing them back, okay? They use timoria if it was just retributive justice, okay? So the word used there is kolossus, and restore you, okay? The word for eternal that we translate to eternal, this is one of those spots in English Bibles where it really bugs me, because that word in other classical Greek literature is very, very, very rarely, I don't even know of a place in the stuff that I've looked at, not that I'm some Greek scholar or anything, but I've never found a place where it's translated eternal. There may be places, but the idea of no beginning, no end, that word aionios that we translate all the time in the Bible in English versions to eternal simply isn't used that way. It's more like a quality of an age, okay? But it's an indeterminate time period. It's not measured specifically. So eternal in our language is a very small sphere of meaning, right? It means this. It means no beginning, no end, or it can kind of mean no end. Okay? We use it that way anyway. That Greek word, aionios, or ion, it's a giant sphere of meaning. It means so many different things depending on the context and the other words around it, right? So it would make no sense for us to translate aionios as eternal and kolossus as punishment if the punishment is retributive. What is the point? They should have used timoria. The Greek writer that wrote that gospel should have used the word timoria. There's no sense in eternally correcting someone. True?
It reminds me of the television show The Good Place. Have you watched The Good Place?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's the same thing, right? You either go to the good place or the bad place, and it's like an eternal.
That's a fairly enlightened show.
It's loved it. Loved every second
Me too.
of it.
Very funny too.
Very funny. But
Yeah.
it reminds me a little bit of that whole theory that you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. But can I just go back to your 5 little houses, as I like to?
Yeah.
Why then, if only one of them really talked about
The possibility
the
of eternal
possibility of
damnation.
why did the largest
Great question.
Christian religion take that and run with it?
Great question. I have an answer.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so historically, you had the Roman Empire in the 5th century in a very split kind of situation, financially in trouble, and so on. Christianity had been used to unite the empire in the past by Constantine and others. And so Justinian, who was the emperor at the time, living in the Byzantine side of the empire, that's where the seat of power was at this point, not in Rome, but everybody in Constantinople considered themselves Roman. That was, socially speaking, like, we are Romans, okay? And that mattered big time, as silly as that sounds. But then we have people that buy tennis shoes for hundreds and hundreds of dollars too. So
Guilty.
how silly is it, right?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. So, no judgment. I'm a Suncoaster. I am. I really don't mean that as a judgmental thing, but that was a reality. So it meant everything to be Roman, even though they weren't in Rome. Okay. Justinian was hook, line, and sinker into that whole social kind of sphere, right? As the emperor. He wanted to unite the empire again. There were many divisions. Because being Roman was so important, he favored the ancient school of Rome. He put immense political pressure on the House of Bishops from around the empire to cater to the Roman school of thought on many things. Our band at Suncoast is named Origen. Origen was one of the guys that Justinian got the House of Bishops to posthumously kick him out. So he's now considered a church little f father because of Justinian and his political moves. Okay. To their credit, the House of Bishops would not renounce, anathema is the Greek term, accursed. Those people, they wouldn't label universalism that way. Origen was a universalist. Many early fathers were universalists. They would not do things like that, and they would not kick Origen all the way out. And that's just one example. Okay, Justinian was putting massive pressure on the House of Bishops, and unfortunately, by this point in the church's history, the church was already highly politicized. You know, it started in the 3rd century and just got worse and worse. So the pressure was immense. This is the Roman emperor. Bishops have known to disappear, okay, when they disagree with the Roman emperor. So many fascinating stories. Anyway, so how was it that Rome rose to prominence? The short answer is because of Justinian. All of a sudden, this was even earlier than Justinian, but the Roman bishop was often seen as, because he was at the seat of everything, the world was centered around Rome. He rose to prominence until finally he was in a papal situation. He became pope, So there's a lot of history around all that. Hell, then, by that point, the problem that the school of Rome had was, the majority of Christians in the empire, they're kind of universalist, or apokatastasis is the Greek term for it. Everything is brought back to God is kind of what it means. And so since they knew that the majority of Christians had that kind of view, they had to lighten up on the possibility of eternal damnation. They found it very useful because fear motivates. But they lightened it up by saying, well, actually, most people just go through a period of purgation. The fires of purgatory. Okay? So that kind of alleviated some of the pressure. By the time you get to the Protestant Reformation, though, you have Dante's Inferno, you have massive suicide rates throughout the Dark Ages, and the church saying anyone who commits suicide, to try to combat that, anybody who commits suicide immediately goes to hell, eternal hell. So it was being used that way. There's all kinds of historical factors that play into this historical construct of eternal damnation, but it is not biblical.
Gotcha. You know what would have made it all better? If a woman just would have walked in there and been like, guys, you're being ridiculous.
Oh, amen.
We would have just fixed it all.
Amen.
We would have been like, y'all just talk to each other and have an open conversation, and let's open the lines of communication, because,
You know how many fewer wars would have been fought if women weren't leadership?
Just a couple I can think of, but, let's just not, let's check your ego.
No judgment.
No judgment. But I feel like a lot of, especially the historical stuff, could have been maybe avoided if we all just checked our egos a little bit and tried to think of the good of the whole instead of the good of our pocketbooks or the good of our our want for power.
Which is why one of the central tenets of Christ's message is death of ego. If you want to live, you got to die. And that's exactly what he means. He means that ego dies so that you can actually live and everybody else around you. So that's what I mean. You don't want to throw that out, right?
No.
It's so beautiful.
It is. But it's just getting everyone to or getting a majority, or getting, the good of the whole to believe in that part of it and stop focusing on some of the other stuff.
Hurting people.
Yeah. The part that hurts people, which is exactly against the part of loving everybody.
Right.
Which is why, my issues with some of the Old Testament, because there's hurt.
Get it.
There's a lot of hurt in the Old Testament.
I get it.
The whole Baal thing just really throws me off.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, why are we hurting people? That doesn't fix anything.
The early Hebrews would say, why are those who worship Moloch, which there's some debate around, but why are they worshiping this deity and burning their infants alive to do it? So just some historical perspective. The Hebrews, who were responsible for the Old Testament, they were the wild-eyed liberals of their day. Their societal structure was so much more equal than anything surrounding them. Okay, so yeah, if you want, well, really almost anything in the world, okay, they really were weirdos.
I would have fit in perfect. I would have been a great Hebrew.
Yeah. See that? But, they were living in a time where people were very violent, and that's the way you survived. Your tribe kills my tribe. My tribe kills your tribe. That's the way we do it.
But love is the answer.
And then you have guys coming in like the prophets and Jesus who are saying, love is the answer. Love is the answer. Kill that dude. And they did. Almost all the prophets were murdered. Jesus was murdered. It just goes on and on. All the apostles except John, traditionally, all of them were murdered. Primarily why? Because they didn't fit in with the status quo.
They were trying to change minds.
They were trying to change minds, exactly. So we are responsible for changing minds as best we can. Just like I can't love everybody at full measure all the time, I can't hope to impact everybody's mind with love. I can only do what I can do. So I do. I try. Probably not everything I can do, but I'm tired. I'm old. So I do my best with that.
Yeah.
Let's say it. Anyway, I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't come here to counsel you or anything, but I just want to hear your story. But
well, I mean, I think that my story has a lot of parts where it's kind of broken and put back together just based off of growing up. But I think like the current part of the trying to reconstruct is just now what I noticed when I wrote everything down. I was at different phases of my life every time I've had deconstruction. I was a teenager. I was a college kid who was going to get married. I had just gotten out of college and was in my first like real career, real like life stuff. And now I'm a mother. And it's like, so every time I've had big life events, something has like my system has had a break in it. My belief system has had a break in it. And I think it's because I see the world and I see what I need a little bit differently. Because right now, my biggest thing is I got to protect my kids and I got to put them in a position that they're in a world that's better than what we're currently in. And how do I teach them and how do I enlighten them and how do I help them grow more like as a mother, more than just sending them over to Anita in the youth center and saying, fix them. Make sure that they know that love is the answer. Like,
well, they'll get that.
They'll get that there. Oh, believe me, these kids have never felt more loved and included. And I love everything that is happening for the youth, especially for William, just because it's hard for him at school and stuff. And he doesn't feel different here. He feels like he's included in part of it. And he has his alter ego. And
a unicorn.
It's a unicorn. And so now that I'm at this phase of my life, how do I take my deconstruction based off of trying to protect these two innocent humans who've gone through a lot in their life and try to make their life, them have a structure of belief like I did as a kid?
Admit what you don't know.
And then send them to you for everything else.
And then know what you can.
Yeah.
You know, and impart what you can know, and admit that you don't know this and that, and send them my way. Yeah. That'll cure them. Yeah. Although you've accused me of breaking you, so.
Oh yeah, you totally broke me.
But that was a podcast with your husband.
Well,
so
I had to stop. I told him, I'm like, I can't, I don't know. Why are there so many universes? Why are there so many timelines? I said, this is not Loki. We are just, this is real life. So, and now
Loki is based on the views of real physicists. I'm just saying. Anyway.
Yeah, but science.
So I really appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
It was fun.
It was fun.
I knew it would be because I know you.
Yeah.
By the way, for all of you that might watch this, if you want to go and do a, what are they called?
Escape room?
Escape room.
Oh.
Yeah. Two of the greatest partners, my wife as well. You will feel dumb.
No.
If you go and do the escape room with them, you will feel dumb. I did. No. Anyway, great hanging out with you. And I hope that your video gets more views than your husband's so that you can hold that over him.
Perfect. That's really the tenets of a great marriage, is holding something over the other person's head.
It makes it work. It does. It's the glue.
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.